You believe in Torah, don't you?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so that's our basis, Torah. So I don't condemn people who happen to believe that someone is or is not the Messiah, but I try to find common ground between what we believe. And I think that common ground is ultimately Torah, but I do teach that by believing that Jesus or anyone else is the Messiah eventually stunts your growth, not just academically, but theologically. I believe that it's easier to come to God directly instead of through an intermediary. I don't teach that Christians are lost. As long as they keep Torah and they identify with the children of Israel, and they identify with the covenant that was made through Abraham, that's the important part. But I'm still in the business of saying what's good for me is good for you. So I'd like to have a discussion to see like where we differ and see where we agree.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what your background in Judaism is.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what I believe. Okay,
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. Look, I'll let you speak for about 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, man,
you
that's
tell
too
me
long.
all about.
Yeah, that's too long.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
All right.
5 minutes.
Just like a regular dialogue back and forth, like a meet and greet. I'm just going to tell you what I believe and my background and what got me to where I am now. Okay, so I wasn't born Jewish. I actually was born into a Catholic family. When I was around 17 years old, I became Protestant, Baptist specifically. And I went to seminary, and I was eventually ordained as a Baptist minister. And then through study, I realized that Jesus wasn't God or the Messiah. And I found myself having nowhere to go till I found Orthodox Judaism, which was the closest thing I could find to what I would consider an ideal kosher belief system, at least based on Torah. And then since then, I mean, I moved to Israel. I learned in seminary and yeshiva there. I started an organization when I was in Israel trying to encourage people who are not Jewish to consider becoming Jewish. Now, I do teach that someone who believes Yeshua is the Messiah, if they keep Torah and identify with the children of Israel and the covenant made to Abraham, they are in the covenant and they ultimately don't need saving. However, I'm here to help anyone reach their highest potential, especially with their walk with God. And I noticed that remaining a Christian hurts your relationship with God and your ability to keep His commandments. So I still encourage people to drop Yeshua and live life how Torah instructed you to, by keeping God's commandments and by reaping the rewards of keeping those commandments. And that's pretty much it. I have a website called bejewish.org, but I act like a liaison between the Messianic world and the Orthodox world, trying to bring the two together. There are groups in Orthodox Judaism that believe that their Rebbe, their teacher, was the Messiah. I don't really see such a big difference between them and Messianic Jews. I also try to convince them to drop those beliefs.
Yeah.
I don't believe they're evil. I just believe that they're misguided. Same thing with Messianics. I just believe they're misguided because they're really devoting too much of their kochos, too much of their energy to some Messiah than just sticking with the instructions that were given to us on Mount Sinai.
That's your story, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. My story is quite... I didn't pick up a Bible. I didn't pick up the scriptures until I was 15. Mm-hmm. Never even knew what the scriptures began to teach until I started reading the scriptures at 15. By the age of 18, I was immersed into the Seventh-day Adventist. Obviously, you've heard of the Seventh-day Adventist,
sure,
yeah?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. I began to learn about certain offshoots within the Seventh-day Adventist organization called Shepherd's Rod and the Branch Davidians. Obviously, you might have heard about the Branch Davidians.
Yes. With David Koresh in Waco, Texas.
Yeah. I was at Waco, Texas. I was at the camp.
Wow. I mean, that's very interesting because they have like a whole miniseries now. I don't know if you're watching it on TV, and that's always fascinated me. In the seminary that I went to, the yeshiva in Israel called Aish Torah, most people don't know that David Koresh learned in Aish Torah. I mean, not in like the base master's program. I mean, he was more like in the essentials program, but he was there. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, by the age, that was when I was around that was a long time ago. Obviously, I was only 22 years old when I ended up in Waco, Texas. Obviously, that messed me up a bit because I lost a lot of friends who died, and I don't know if you know much about David Koresh's teachings, but they're very disturbing, and that threw me off course for a number of years.
Wait.
And
so you knew David Koresh personally?
I was in Waco. I stayed on his compound.
Wow.
I was being taught by David Koresh. Personally, I was actually there. And you might say, well, how did you end up doing that? But David Koresh was targeting Seventh-day Adventists. Okay, that was his primary focus. He went around and he had people who were targeting Seventh-day Adventists, and I myself was already in the offshoot movements of the Shepherd's Rod and Branch Davidians. But I don't want to bore you too much. I left David Koresh anyway. And for a number of years, I kind of strayed away from religion and the Bible and God and everything. But about 12 years ago, I made my way back to the scriptures again. And for 12 years, I've been trying to understand, the truth, or understand what Father's will is. And about 7-8 years ago, I left the Seventh-day Adventist congregation because I began to believe that a lot of what they teach was just totally far out. So I began looking at the Hebrew roots movement, the Messianic Hebrew roots movement, and I joined a few congregations in the Hebrew roots movement for a few years. But in the last year or two, I've been a bit disillusioned with certain things, the way Messianics operate and so forth. So I've pretty much become a bit of a loner, as you can say. And I just tend to, I'm seeking Father for myself. And that's why I do most of my friends are on Facebook or stuff like that. But that's basically my story. And the way I describe myself, I would describe myself as a Hebrew Israelite, who I believe that my ancestors could have or could not have been biological Israelites. But according to scripture, that doesn't matter anyway, because the Torah teaches that there's one law for the Israelite, and there's one law for the stranger. So,
is this the same group? It's really almost like the opposite of the black Hebrew Israelites? Because I know there's a group in England that claims to be a direct descendant to the actual Israelites, and it ties into the monarchy somehow.
Yeah, most Hebrew Israelite groups claim that their ancestors were the biological Israelites, Mm-hmm. But like I said, to me, that it's not really important, because Father did not forbid any strangers from joining the assembly or the congregation anyway. And
that's the point I've always made with the black Hebrews. I'm like, why is it a big deal if people could join? Esther joined, Jethro joined. The concept of joining Israel is a Torah concept, right?
It's not a color thing. It's not a color thing. God did not forbid any colors or nations. As long as you wanted to live your life according to the will of Father, then you were accepted among the tribes, whichever tribe you wanted to go and live amongst. Mm-hmm. So my story is that I believe in the Torah, I believe in the prophets, I believe in the writings, and I suppose the only difference which separates myself and yourself is my belief in Yeshua. Mm-hmm. So that's about it, really. That's my story.
Okay. from your opinion, why would you say that we need Yeshua?
Why do we need Yeshua?
Yes.
I've been investigating this, and I put out quite a few posts. And when I go back to Mount Sinai, when our Father called out or delivered the children of Israel from their captivity in in Egypt, and took them to Sinai, where they entered into a covenant with our Father on Mount Sinai. Now, that covenant was a blood covenant. Now, many people are taking the word covenant very lightly.
Wait. So how is that a blood covenant? On Mount Sinai or the Passover?
No. Mount Sinai, where Moses sprinkled the people.
Okay.
Yeah. Moses killed the sacrifice, and he sprinkled half the blood on the utensils and the tabernacle, and he sprinkled half the basin of the blood on the people. With those scriptures.
Right, that's part of the tabernacle ceremony, but not the Sinai experience. In other words, so when Moses went up to Mount Sinai and got the tablets, it had nothing to do with blood. In other words, the notion of blood doesn't appear in that aspect. Now, from there, God commands them to build their tabernacle, and priests always, not just at that time, would yearly sprinkle blood on the congregation, but I don't think blood actually had a play in the Sinai covenant. Now, the term Sinai covenant is used a lot.
Yeah.
So we have the Abrahamic covenant, and the Sinai covenant is an extension to that covenant. But I'm pretty sure blood is never mentioned as a part of that covenant. Although, yes, blood, I mean, they had sacrifices. I'm just not familiar with it being mentioned with the actual Sinai covenant. It says that if you listen to my words, or I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, there's no blood mentioned there.
Sure. What I'm saying is that the blood itself came a little bit later, but if we back up a little bit, where they stood at the base of Mount Sinai, and they said to Father, everything that you have said, we will do. Yeah?
Right. We will do and we will listen. It says Nasiv and Ishma. Right.
They will obey, basically. Right. Everything that they'll Shema, whatever, they will obey. Now, that was entering into a covenant. Now, we understand that as like a marriage covenant, like a contract, do they call it a ketubah? Yeah?
It's not really the same thing. Look, with the Torah itself, never mentions God as being the bride of Israel. That appears in the prophets once, maybe twice later on, but the Torah never links it to that type of covenant, because then it would be sort of weird to a certain extent. God refers to Israel in the prophet, not just as his wife, but also as his son, also as his virgin daughter. It's really not something that's synonymous with a covenant itself. A covenant just means agreement, but it's better not to link it to any sort of earthly, carnal type covenant between a man and a woman. Now, mind you, the ketubah doesn't appear in the Torah. There's no document that you're supposed to give your wife when you marry her, according to the Torah. The rabbis, in about 100 years before the Common Era, there was a rabbi named Shimon ben Shetach. So he developed this ketubah, or the actual contract itself. But I'm just saying, I understand what you're saying, and it's a pretty illustration of Israel being God's wife, but you have to remember that it does say that Israel is God's son and Israel is God's virgin daughter. So it's
true.
I
understand what you're saying, but there are many scriptures which allude to it. Jeremiah 3, Isaiah chapter 50.
Right.
It's
not in the Torah. It's not in the 5 books of Moses. We know that a prophet could only say things to bring you back to Torah.
Yeah, but it says it says to the Torah and the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, the Torah and the testimony comes from the prophets. So obviously, if the prophets are testifying to a concept, then that concept must be understood. That's the way it was. I mean, Jeremiah 50
Hold on, wait a minute. You're quoting Isaiah chapter 8
50,
here, right?
50. Yeah, it's Isaiah 8:20.
Right. Isaiah 8:20 says to the law to the prophets. That is very hyperbolic. Most literal translations say If there is no Torah in my words, there is no light within it. In other words, what Isaiah is trying to say there is that if everything I say does not coincide with the Torah, then throw it away. So basically saying that everything he says does coincide with the Torah, but if we can't make that connection, it's not the fault of the prophet, it's the fault of the person doing the interpretation. In other words, if you think that Isaiah is saying something that is adding to a commandment or to an idea that's brought down in the Torah, then you're reading the prophet wrong, because the prophet there said that he doesn't add to the Torah. Remind you, a prophet is not allowed to add to the Torah or take away from the Torah, and if he does, he gets put to death. Right. Like, why would you think that them stating that Israel is the bride of God, that's some sort of metaphysically true statement or absolutely true statement? No, I mean, it's hyperbolic, it's symbolic, it's nothing to build doctrine on. Why? Because if you build doctrine on it, you're adding to the Torah. The Torah doesn't mention this idea. Yeah. But there is a relationship between God and Israel, for sure, 100%. But to limit it to just marriage or just a father to a son?
When we talk about Israel, as being God's wife, we know that's not literally to be taken literally. It's an allegory. Okay. I mean, sure. I think Jeremiah 6 says, I've likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman. Okay, so it's telling us there that Israel is likened to a delicate and comely woman. And when God entered into covenant, or Father entered into covenant, it's not as if they were literally married, but it was for us to understand that this was a very serious relationship. So when you stand before God and Father and tell him, if I say I love my wife and I'm going to be faithful to my wife, and I enter into a marriage covenant with my wife, and I go and my wife goes and is unfaithful to me, she merits a death sentence, and that is what happened at Sinai.
Wait, hold on. See, there you go. You're building too much on something that you said was just allegorical, symbolic, hyperbolic.
Yeah.
If that was true, then God himself would be violating his own standards for marriage. Because we know that if a woman gets caught in the act of adultery, she's put to death. The rabbis go further and teach that you can't even remarry this woman. How can you marry a woman who's been unfaithful to you? So we can't run too far with the notion that Israel is God's wife. You know what I mean? Or son or daughter, right? I mean, it's there to teach us a lesson. It's not there for us to build a whole religion on, which is what you're trying to do right now.
Well, no, it says... I'm not trying to build a religion or doctrine on this. I mean, you asked me to explain how I understand it.
Okay.
I understand it in the way that we did enter into a symbolic marriage covenant.
No, okay. Yeah, but it's not... we entered into an agreement. It was just an agreement. There's many people who broke that agreement. Was Abraham God's wife? I mean, Abraham also had a covenant, right? I mean, the circumcision. I mean, how does that tie into some marriage covenant? What do we expect our wives to also be circumcised?
No, not at all. But I'm just, like I said, there's various scriptures. I mean, Jeremiah 3 talks about the divorcement. Isaiah 50 talks about where is your bill of divorcement? It says, I'll put thee away because of your wickedness and your whoredoms. Ezekiel chapter 16 talks about the same thing. Throughout all the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they all pick up on this theme of Israel being unfaithful and becoming an adulterous woman.
Let me ask you a question quick. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, to what exile were they referring to when they were speaking?
There was various exiles. I mean, you got the northern kingdom, right, which was exiled, and you've got the southern kingdom that was exiled.
Right. Okay.
So some of them speak about the northern kingdom. Some of them speak about the southern kingdom. Some of them speak about both kingdoms.
Right, and none of them speak about the Roman exile. In other words, the first exile was the exile of the northern kingdoms. Now, there's a formula in Torah for exile and redemption. In other words, if the northern kingdom in Assyria would have properly repented, God would have brought them back to Israel. They didn't repent, so they became lost completely. Now, the second exile was the Babylonian exile. That's who Jeremiah was speaking to. That's who Ezekiel was speaking to. And this is after Isaiah. So in other words, the Jews were already redeemed for that exile. I mean, read the book of Ezra, the book of Nehemiah, right? They were redeemed. That formula was already fulfilled, or it took place. They repented in Babylon. God brought them back to Israel. So virtually every prophecy regarding redemption that you're mentioning already occurred. So
no. This is why I was going to go back to Sinai, because at Sinai, when Father had declared the nation as a royal nation of kings and priests, they didn't need a redeemer. Listen to what I'm trying to say to you now. Okay. At Sinai, they did not require a redeemer. Okay? Because we're told that Moses and Aaron and the 70 elders, they ascended the mountain where they saw the God of Israel standing upon the sapphire stone. And it says there that they ate and they drank and they were not destroyed. That shows me that at that stage of Israel's infancy, they were accepted without a redeemer. There was no need for a redeemer to come and redeem Israel at that stage. But what happened was 40 days later, they decided to marry another god. They decided to marry the golden calf god, which we know as Hasatan. Okay, so they betrayed their marriage ketubah, their marriage contract, and it was from there that they were declared an adulterous nation. And what happened, from them being kings and priests, they now needed saving themselves. They now needed to be redeemed themselves. So Father temporarily instituted the Levitical Aaronic priesthood and additional sacrifices, which were the hatat, the sin, and the asham, which were the guilt. These two offerings were never offered in any time before that period of time. There was burnt offerings, there was peace offerings, there was food offerings. But now, in the Levitical Aaronic priesthood, Father instituted the sin, the hatat, and the asam offerings, the guilt offerings, as a temporary covering. A temporary covering as a shadow picture, because they now needed redeeming, because they were going to be destroyed at Mount Sinai. The death penalty was enacted on them. It's, in other terms, it's called the Suzerain Treaty. You can see this in Genesis chapter 15 and Jeremiah 34, where when two parties entered into a covenant, there would be animals cut in half, and the two parties would enter through the pieces.
All right, let me respond.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, first of all, with that statement, initially, the notion of being a Mamlechet Kohanim, it says a kingdom of priests. It doesn't mention kings, okay? I mean, just to make that clear. There's nowhere in Torah that the notion of a redeemer is mentioned. There are no redeemers. God is our only redeemer. We redeem ourselves. And this is what appears in Deuteronomy chapter 28, 29, 30, but that lays down the formula for exile and redemption. It says that when we begin to miss the mark, when we begin to emulate the nations that we displaced, tied to Deuteronomy chapter 18, God will raise up unto us a prophet. So there we have Isaiah, we have Jeremiah, to try to bring us back. If we fail to heed the words of that prophet, then God will exile you to the four corners of the world, and only till the day you repent will he then bring you back and elevate you to your former glory. That's exile and redemption, the way it has always occurred throughout Tanakh. This notion of a redeemer doesn't exist. Now, you're saying that only because the korbanot, the chatat, the sin offering, all these offerings appeared after Mount Sinai, this was in some way instituted to repair the sin of the golden calf. But mind you, they didn't have any commandments given by the Almighty before Mount Sinai, with the exception of the command given to Abraham to circumcise himself, and that command still had to be given over again because this nation really didn't know of it outside of the Levium.
Yeah.
In other words, these commandments of sacrifices or the sacrificial system was going to be given to them eventually, right? And only because it appeared after the sin of the golden calf doesn't mean that it only appeared because of the sin of the golden calf. The whole covenant between God and Israel started on Mount Sinai and ended while they were in the wilderness. In other words, the transmission of Torah from God through Moses to Israel wasn't something that happened in one day. And this is the mistake I think that you're making. Like there was some sort of piece of paper that came down from heaven on that day that Israel signed it. The covenant wasn't signed or wasn't sealed until all the commandments were given. Even all the way in Parashat Re'eh, in the book of Deuteronomy later on, God tells them, choose life, that you shall live. Now this is way after the whole golden calf event. In other words, God is still sealing the covenant with Israel during that time.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, but...
Also, there was no death penalty before the Torah was given on the children of Israel.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't begin with the children of Israel, though, does it?
Of course it does. Because the children of Israel knew nothing of this God. I mean, how can that God hold them accountable for something they didn't know?
We have to go right back to Adam, because a death penalty was pronounced on Adam and Hava. It says, in dying, you shall surely die.
Yeah, but that was specific to them. It says, on the day that you eat from this tree, you shall surely die. Obviously, God's not putting people to death for eating from trees, right?
It wasn't a tree, though, was it?
Literally, it says it was a tree.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. There's a much deeper meaning of what the.
It says Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge.
It's not a physical tree.
Okay, well.
But that's another story, anyway.
A Torah pasuk doesn't depart from its literal meaning, unless you're going to start creating a new religion here. It says tree. Well, apart from that, we could theorize what that could mean, but you can't deny that commandment doesn't apply to Israelites hundreds of years later. Here, look. First, God had to make himself lovable by the Jewish people, which is why we don't see the Almighty punishing the Israelites till after Mount Sinai, because they didn't know any better. He brought them out of Egypt just like a child, like he says in Hosea, that he brought them and he reached out to them with cords of love, right? And then
of course he punished them. The Levites slaughtered 3,000.
Yeah, this is after Mount Sinai.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But that's after they committed the sin.
Yeah, I'm saying that between them leaving Egypt and them reaching Mount Sinai, there was no punishment because they didn't know any better. But once
they didn't do anything wrong until they reached Sinai.
It doesn't mention that they did anything wrong because the Torah wants to know that Israel wasn't held accountable because they didn't know any better. You're saying that they were liable to the death penalty even before they accepted the Torah.
No. I'm saying it's a different angle when you look at Adam, okay? But let's just concentrate on Israel, like you said.
All right.
I just want to stay with Israel. Let's stay with Israel, not go further back. Let's concentrate on that for now. But like you said, so yeah, carry on what you were saying.
You were saying that the Torah got changed in some way just because the children of Israel decided to build a golden calf. Now that's kind of odd that God changed his Torah.
It was added. It was added to.
Now where does it say that?
Well,
I mean, can we just assume that the Torah is the Torah, and then those standards were going to be there, whether they worshiped idols or not? Regardless, towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy, God predicts that you're going to worship idols and you're going to be exiled. In other words, even before they were exiled, God predicted that it was going to happen. Now, why would he then, in some unknowing way, have to add a whole sacrificial system just because they happened to worship the golden calf? And mind you, everyone who worshipped the golden calf was put to death.
Why? Because I've to explain to you. They were a kingdom of priests. They that every single one of them were a kingdom of priests. They didn't need to bring sacrifices of Hatat and Asham.
That's not what a priest means. Hold on, wait a minute. It also says in the books of the writings that David's sons were priests. A priest is ultimately just someone who serves God, not necessarily one of the Kohanim. And when it says that you should be a kingdom of priests, it's saying that we should aspire to the holy levels of a priest. Not necessarily that every Israelite could bring his own sacrifices. Because if that was the case, like, why was the sacrificial system only limited to Kohanim, to those Levites?
Okay, let me explain to you why. Because we're told specifically at Sinai that it was only the tribe of Levi who never worshipped the golden calf. And that is the specific reason why the tribe of Levi were chosen.
When they were in Egypt, it says that the tribe of Levi was the only tribe that held to the covenant. They were the priestly tribe, and they were the only ones who circumcised themselves. So Pharaoh allowed them not to work in heavy labor, but allowed them to be like the priestly class even from back then. It's
right,
not...
Who had chosen them to be the priestly class back then?
Oh, I don't know. It clearly went contrary to the prophecy or to the statement made by Jacob in Genesis 49 that they ultimately wouldn't amount to anything, but they did. And Moses was also a Levite and a Cohen. So Moses, Aaron, they were from this priestly family. But there isn't enough there for you to run with this notion that every Israelite was ultimately a priest. When that statement, mind you, is made in the book of Leviticus, way after this, the notion of Israel being a kingdom of priests. I see that you're trying to build a theology here, but you're redesigning the wheel. Jews have this thing already mapped out. We know the language, we know the story, but the difference between us and you is that you're ending up in a completely different belief system, ultimately needing some redeemer, some intermediary, some vicar of God. I mean, you're doing a lot with a little.
Well, this is where we differ, you see, because I don't... You see, most of my belief in Yeshua is structured within the festivals themselves. You see, Judaism, they look at the festivals, the Pesach, the Shavuot, the trumpets and tabernacles and Yom Kippur, and all they see is historical things. They don't see nothing else. But that's not what the festivals were designed for. The festivals are shadow pictures of an entire history of Israel and how their redemption would come about. And if you understand the festivals and how their type and antitypical fulfillments will play out, then you can clearly see the entire plan of salvation as was designed by the Heavenly Father.
Okay, hold on. Now, I know that you see this, and I've talked to many Christians who can also articulate very nicely how they see the festivals connected to the New Testament. However, do you think the Almighty is going to cast a Jew into the lake of fire who happens to not make the same connection you've just made? In other words, by someone just taking the literal meaning of the Torah, like just the literal meaning of the Torah.
No, but wait. Actually, wait. Let me just clarify that point, what you just said. I don't believe any Jew who is worshipping the Father is going to be cast into the lake of fire, whether they believe in Yeshua or not.
So, if that's the case, then why do we need Yeshua to begin with?
Right, because this is what I'm trying to say. Because you don't believe in the New Testament, okay? The New Testament says that there are the house of Yehuda has been blinded deliberately by the Father until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. Now, these Gentiles are not Gentiles. what we're seeing now is the house of Ephraim. The house of Ephraim are the lost tribes of Israel. And predominantly, this is who Yeshua came for. He even says himself in Matthew 10 and Matthew 15, he says, I've not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which is talking about the northern kingdom.
Hold on. Israel is used both ways.
It's interchangeable.
Right.
It's interchangeable.
Yeah, interchangeable with Judah and the northern kingdom. Clearly, if Jesus would have come for the lost sheep of only the northern kingdoms, he should have went to Assyria, not
they
Judah.
Did go to Assyria, but not Yeshua himself.
Hold on.
Sent his Talmidim. He
In
sent
John,
his emissaries.
in John chapter 3, it says that he came to his own, and his own did not receive him.
Yes, that's Yehuda.
Right, absolutely. So when he says that I came for the lost house of Israel, he meant Israel as a whole, not the political differences between the north and the south.
No. If you read John 10, I'll read you a statement. Just stay there. I'll read you the very words of Caiaphas. Just stay there a minute. I don't know whether you have a New Testament.
By the way, you're looking it up. My statement is that it makes no sense when he arrives in Judah, like if he's looking for the 10 lost tribes.
Here. Asher, look what it says here. This is what Caiaphas said. Okay? He says, but he did not say this from himself. This is John chapter 11, verse 51. But Caiaphas did not say that for himself, but being the Kohen Hagadol that year, he navu that Yeshua was about to die for that nation, which is talking about the Yehuda, and not for that nation only, but to gather into one the children of Elohim who were scattered abroad, which is talking about the lost tribes of Israel. So because Yehuda had rejected Yeshua, his whole focus was now that Yehuda would be blinded. This is what Romans talks about. Romans 11.
Okay, hold on. You're saying that after Jesus was crucified, then his ministry to the 10 lost tribes began, which is just what the Mormons believe.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, how does that... That's what the Mormons believe, and they believe that the 10 lost tribes arrived in the Americas, and many of the Native Americans are descendants of the 10 lost tribes. That's the birth of Mormonism.
It's not Mormonism, trust me. The 10 is New Testament theology. If you read Paul, if you read James, if you read the books of Peter, they're all talking about the northern tribes, the lost tribes of Israel, being immediately ministered to. And it speaks about Yehuda as being blinded until the fullness of the 10 tribes comes in. And then once the fullness of the 10 tribes are gathered, then the attention will turn. And this is what Micah 5 says. I don't know if you understand Micah 5. Micah 5 says exactly the same thing. It says, gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. They shall smite the judge of Israel upon the cheek. Okay? That's Yeshua. Okay, then it says, he, Yeshua, shall give them up. Give up Yehuda until the time that she which travails has brought forth. Then they shall return to the children of Israel.
Hold on.
Or the children of Israel shall return to Judah.
So your point is that the Gentile nations who believe in Yeshua nowadays
are the 10 lost tribes.
Right, of the 10 lost tribes of okay. All right. I see that this is what you believe. This is your theology. And I can't really stop you from believing whatever you want to believe. But by the simple fact that a Jew doesn't ultimately need Yeshua means that basically every Gentile could just convert to Judaism, not accept Yeshua, live a full Torah life.
They do need Yeshua, but they've been blinded.
Oh, so they need Yeshua.
Of course they need Yeshua, but the death is still for them. But at the moment, the Father is giving them, is winking. The Father is allowing every Jew. The Father is allowing every Jew
But we have to go back to my previous question, that if a Jew chose to take the Torah literally, apart from all the foreshadowings that you claim are there, if they just went by the literal understanding of the Torah, how can a good God punish them for not making the connections that you claim to be making?
But he's not punishing them. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I believe that the Jews, since the death of Yeshua, all the Jews that have been born from the death of Yeshua up until today, who have lived Torah obedient lives and have worshipped the Father without recognizing the Son, they will still be resurrected in the resurrection of the just. But at that stage, they will be made to recognize that Yeshua was who he was, and they will acknowledge him.
Right, and if they refuse to acknowledge him, they'll be cast into the lake of fire.
Then they won't be accepted at that stage. Right, okay. But at this time, they are being accepted in the position that they are in.
Okay, so all this was definitely built off of the symbolic, poetic statements in the prophets. I'm positive that you cannot justify what you believe with the Torah alone.
I can.
With the Torah alone. With the Torah. No. Okay. Well, the festivals aren't saying anything explicit. It's telling you to act certain things out because God's telling you, but it's not telling you.
If you look at the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you see, this is what I'm trying to tell you. The Jew will tell you that the Passover lamb is just the lamb that was needed to sprinkle blood on the... No, it's not like that.
Lamb, sheep, or goat, by the way. I mean, it doesn't just have to be a lamb. I mean, keves could be...
That's right.
Okay.
That's fine. But what I'm saying is, that is a type and antitype. Okay?
I know you believe this, but the Torah tells us the opposite. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 29, it says, the secret things are for God, and only the revealed things are for us, for our children to do. In other words, he tells us over and over what we have to do. Just keep his commandments. He never says, look and try to decipher my coming Messiah through the festivals, because this is really just a test. No, it doesn't say that. It tells us not to delve on anything that's hidden. And you're building your whole religion.
What is Proverbs 25?
The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, only tells you. Forget about Proverbs. I'm saying what the Torah says. If you think anything in the writings is telling you something other than what the Torah is teaching you, then you're reading that incorrectly. The Torah only tells you to keep his commandments. It tells you not to try to decipher mystical things, secret things. Just stick to what's revealed. That's all. And I'm telling you, if a Jew chose to take God's advice, could God still then cast him into the lake of fire for not accepting some Messiah that doesn't appear in the Torah? Now, mind you, the notion of the Messiah is not in the Torah.
Well, that's it's how your eyes see it. I mean, I go back to Genesis chapter 3, and I see a cryptic vision of Messiah when Father says to the serpent, "You shall wound the heel of the seed of the woman, but the seed of the woman shall crush your head."
And I have a different interpretation to that also, but the difference between you and I is that I'm not going to build a religion off it. If God told you, don't delve into anything secret, it says stick to what's revealed.
Yeah, okay, I spoke to a rabbi, and he said to me, all that's saying is that in the future, snakes would bite humans on their ankles. Now, come on, what kind of ridiculous answer is that to give?
And that's a valid personal interpretation, just like you have your own personal devotional interpretation.
For instance, let's have a look at the serpent. You know, you say that Father is not idolatrous. Yeah, would the Father direct us to idols? Would Yahuwah break one of his commandments?
Wait. God himself is not under his own commandments. Those commandments are for us.
When all the serpents bit all the people in the wilderness, he had Moshe erect a brazen serpent, and he put that brazen serpent on a stake, and anybody who did not walk up to that brazen serpent for healing died.
Okay.
What's going on here? Are you trying to tell me that that's not a shadow picture of something much greater?
I told you the Torah itself told you to not delve into the cryptic, into the secret. Only stick between what's revealed. Why? Because it's a gateway for offshoots. In other words, I have no problem with your interpretations and your foreshadowings. The only problem I have is that you're condemning someone who doesn't see your connection. In other words,
I'm not condemning them. I'm not condemning them.
What you're saying that they will ultimately burn for eternity if they don't accept Yeshua on the last day.
But they will see Yeshua and they will accept him.
Oh, okay.
But that's what it says in Zechariah 12 and 13. It says, in that day they shall mourn. They shall mourn for him.
And if you read the book of Chronicles, you see that that's talking about Josiah, who was killed with an arrow.
Again, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Judaism throws everything into the past and just leaves it into the past.
Because this idea of double interpretation...
Well, that's not the way I study the scriptures.
Okay.
To me, the scriptures are living. The scriptures are living today, tomorrow, and forever.
We don't believe in progressive revelation.
Trust me.
There's no such thing as a double interpretation.
The scriptures are multi-layered.
No, well, I disagree. Well, the Torah is the basis to everything, and everything has to point you back to the Torah, or it's leading you astray.
Trust me. I mean, what can I say? I mean,
the Torah is clear. The Torah is telling you to keep His commandments, and you'll be blessed. You will live. It never mentions a Messiah. It never mentions to try to make a connection between all the feasts and festivals. You said that, and it's fine. You can believe that, but your whole movement is going to condemn someone else to an eternity of hell just because they don't see your interpretation. You know why? Because the Torah...
I just told you they're not going to be condemned. I just told you they're not going to be condemned.
Right, because you believe they're all going to accept Yeshua.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the difference? I'm saying they're not. Here, you know what? Here, listen.
I'm saying they are.
The reason,
and that's what
offshoots.
Romans. That's what Romans. Do you know that the scriptures doesn't say, contrary to what you've learned about what Christians believe. I don't call myself a Christian anyway. I'm a Hebrew Israelite. Okay. I don't associate with Christianity because Christianity is paganism. Okay, I'm a Hebrew Israelite.
It's the same thing. If you believe in Yeshua and you believe in the New Testament, you're a Christian.
It's totally different. Trust me. Christianity is involved in total paganism.
The reason you constantly quote the prophets and the book of Proverbs or whatever in the writings is because everything you believe is not from the Torah. See, the Torah is not easy to twist. It's pretty clear cut. It tells you, do this, don't do that. And it goes even further. It says, don't delve into anything mystical and into anything spiritual. It says, just stick to what's been revealed to you. That's it. It's hard to enter a cult if you stick to the Torah alone. However, you basically justify everything you believe in the hyperbolic statements in the prophets. Right now, like you just mentioned, Zechariah, that's clearly talking about King Josiah being killed and saying, oh, well, it's talking about Jesus. Oh, well, you could say that about anything. Muslims say that
Asher, I tell you what, look, let's talk about the Messiah then. We've just done all that groundwork.
Okay. Now, does the Torah mention a Messiah?
Who is the Messiah? When is he coming?
Does the Torah mention a Messiah? Does the Torah mention that a Messiah is to come?
Well, the only alluding to that we have.
Forget about illusions. Deuteronomy chapter 18 does not speak about a Messiah. It speaks about a prophet being raised up when Israel begins to emulate the nations they've displaced. It says that when you begin to do like they do, I will raise up for you a prophet. And he did that many times. Okay. Jeremiah, Isaiah.
So didn't the Father choose David and tell him that his son would be the Messiah?
All the kings from the line of David were anointed with oil.
Right, but we're not talking about the Messiah.
Okay. God never told David anything about his son being a Messiah. He said that his throne would be established forever. Speaking of Solomon, if he did not stray from the right to the left. But we know that Solomon stumbled. But the idea of the throne of David, i.e. a righteous king of Israel, always existed. In other words, because that's the landmark. What about
Isaiah 11? the rod shall come from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Isn't that saying that Jesse would bring forth David, and then from David would spring the man whose name is the branch, the Tzemach, the Netzah?
That's what I just said, that the king comes nowadays from the line of David. Now that king...
Isaiah 11 is not talking about a line of kings. He's talking about three specific people. The stump of Jesse.
The stump of Jesse was David, right? Then we know that David had a son named Solomon, and Solomon had two sons who became king. There's many kings from the line of David, and this line is not broken. The notion of a righteous king coming from David is the landmark of when Israel gets their act together, and they're already in the land of Israel, and then they elect a king. Because mind you, the role of a king plays nothing in redemption in Torah. He doesn't have a role in the redemptive process. We elect the king. Now, there are some rabbinic ideas that the king, the potential king, before he's king, will help Israel repent, and God will himself redeem Israel, bring them back to the land of Israel, build the temple, and if this king or this potential king caused all this to happen, then he is the true messianic king. But that doesn't mean that his kingship is going to be perpetual. In other words, he will eventually die, and his son will take over, and on and on.
Let me just read something from the book of Samuel. Just bear with a moment.
As long as you acknowledge that everything you're teaching is devotional.
How do you see this? I'm going to read 2 Samuel chapter 7, reading from verse 10. It says, "And I shall appoint a place for my people Israel, and shall plant them, and they shall dwell in a place of their own, and no longer be afraid, neither shall the children of wickedness oppress them any more, as at the beginning. Even from the day I appointed rulers over my people Israel, and have caused you to rest from all your enemies. And Yahuwah have declared to you that he would make you a house. When your days are filled," in other words, when David dies, "and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up from your seed after you, who comes from your inward parts, and shall establish his reign."
Well, it's Solomon.
It's not Solomon, though, as you go on your seed.
It continues to say that it's Solomon. That Solomon will build a house for the Lord. It was Solomon who built the temple, correct?
Hold on, let me finish. If you see what I'm going to read here, Solomon did not fulfill it. Listen. "He builds a house for my name. I will establish the throne of his reign forever. I am to be his father, and he is to be my son. If he does perversely, I shall reprove him with the rod of men, and with the blows of the sons of men."
Clearly an earthly king. Clearly an earthly king. King right there.
Of course. But my kindness does not turn aside from him, as I turned aside from Shaul, whom I removed before you. And your house and your reign are to be steadfast.
So it is Solomon.
But this is not Solomon. This is. I believe this to be a messianic prophecy. You see, this is where I differ.
And Solomon was a Messiah. Every king from the line of David, including priests, were Messiahs because they were anointed with oil.
I understand, but there is to be what you said. I agree with what you just said. That there. See, even though I believe in Yeshua, I also believe there has to be an earthly, biological son of David who will reign too. Okay? The scriptures are like this scripture here, I believe, is referring to the ultimate Mashiach who will stand. And like what you said.
So you're saying that it's referring to Solomon, but as well, it's referring to the Messiah.
It has, like Psalm 72. Have you read Psalm 72?
Go ahead.
Well, if you read Psalm 72, it tells you about the ultimate Messiah there.
I know that you see this, but this is not the literal meaning. This is you connecting some sort of dots there. It's not literally there. Jews don't see it. Here, why is it that the only people who run with this idea are people who don't know Hebrew, people who don't even keep commandments, and they're walking around going up to Jews telling them what their Torah actually says. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Here, look, by the simple fact that since the existence of Jesus and his following, the world who claimed to be following a Jewish rabbi has basically trampled upon every commandment in the Torah boastfully.
Where? Who?
The Hebrew Roots movement.
That's Christianity.
Is less than 30 years old. Okay, so
that's what I'm telling you. Christianity has nothing to do.
So tell me, okay.
Christianity has nothing to do with the Netzarim.
Tell me. Okay. So 200 years ago, there were Netzarim?
The Netzarim were killed and destroyed by Christianity. This is what Paul says. If you read the writings of Paul...
So you're proving my point here, that the only true Torah-keeping Christians died around 200 years after the death of Jesus. And for the last 2,000 years, the only reason you know about Jesus and the New Testament is because of this line of teachers that have been condemning Jews and walking around with that New Testament told you about...
No, because if you understand that the Bible wasn't even available to Europeans until about 400 years ago. From the time of Yeshua until about 1600 years after Yeshua, Europeans couldn't even read the Bible, my friend.
Here, my point is that wouldn't it have been safer for all your Gentile relatives to just have become Jews, initially, Orthodox Torah-keeping Jews, and they would have kept Torah this whole time, than having to wait to 2017, for Tony, to stumble across some Hebrew Roots movement to in some way get a glimpse of Torah. In other words, Christianity or the New Testament has actually hurt people's relationship with God more than it's ever helped it from a Torah perspective.
Let me tell you why.